Thank you, Maura. This has been an amazing adventure for me to be here over the summer with all that I've done. But let's just dive into the program. And Cameron will be singing Gershwin's 1919 song, Swanee, his hit tune, and I will be playing Gershwin's piano roll that he made in 1920 of the same, and it is his 10 fingers playing. So you're basically hearing Cameron being accompanied by George Gershwin.
I've been away from you a long time. I never thought I'd miss you so. Somehow I feel your love was real. Near you I long to be. The birds are singing, it is song time. The banjo strumming soft and low. I know that you yearn for me too. Swanee, you're calling me. Swanee, how I love you, my dear old Swanee. I'd give the world to be among the folks in DIX. I even know my mammy's waiting for me, praying for me down by the Swanee. The folks up north will see me no more when I go to the Swanee shore. Swanee, how I love you, my dear old Swanee. I'd give the world to be among the folks in DIX. I even know my mammy's waiting for me, praying for me down by the Swanee. The folks up north won't see me no more when I go to the Swanee shore. I'll be happy. Swanee, Swanee, I'm coming back to Swanee. Mammy, Mammy, I love the old folks at home. I love the old folks at home.
Well, let's all thank Cameron for singing this song because, as we know, it contains a verboten word. What is that? Mammy. Because, I know, because let's start with the fact that this piece was composed in 1919, and it was first sung by Al Jolson. Now, Al Jolson was born in Lithuania. He was Jewish, but at that point in his career, which is right in that period, 1919, he was the most highly paid Broadway singer. And what he would appear in is blackface. Now, that's a convention that came from the 19th century, that white performers took cork to their face, and in a sense, it was a liberation for them. But now we have a somewhat different idea about this. But that said, this was Gershwin's big break. This was a tune he wrote at the age of 22. He was born 1898, died 1937 of a brain tumor, tragedy, and all this. But this opened the door for Gershwin to go forward as an original composer and do the kind of work that he intended to do. And P.S., by the way, he made more money from Swanee than anything else. So we have to sort of contextualize this performance in the sense that it was done 99 years ago. It was a different world, but how different? Well, that's another story. But the point is, we're left with this music. And we're left with those lyrics. And we are left with a player piano. And that's where we're going to start with George Gershwin now. The story of Gershwin is not triumphalist now. It's a question of how did he work with these various cultural forces in his lifetime that were coming to the fore from African American culture, and how did he integrate within that? How did he use it? How did they use him? It's a big story, and I think that's where I'm going with these materials. Now, Gershwin made 140 piano rolls between 1915 and 1925, and those were in his early years. They were commercial entities. They were made so that sheet music sales could be enhanced, people could have something to play on their player piano. The player piano was the central instrument of the period. This is where people gathered around, still feeling the same sense of the piano coming from the 19th century, and at the same time they could have these wonderful automatic piano rolls, and they wouldn't have to learn the notes, but they could sing along with it, and so it was just a wonderful device, but it had the life of a mayfly by the time Gershwin really rose to his highest prominence, which was right around 1925 and 26. The industry was on its way down, so it just didn't last very long. But while it was going, it was roaring. So one of the things about Gershwin that is pretty striking with regard to the player piano is that his biographer, Isaac Goldberg, asked him to remember his earliest childhood memories of music. And here's what George Gershwin said, quote, "One of my first definite memories goes back to the age of 6. I stood outside a penny arcade listening to an automatic piano, leaping through Rubinstein's Melody in F. The peculiar jumps in the music held me rooted. To this very day, I can't hear the tune without picturing myself outside the arcade on 125th Street, standing there barefoot and in overalls, drinking it all in avidly." So that's a pretty powerful early memory. We all have some, but that was his. Okay, I thought it would be just interesting to hear a little bit of that melody in F so you could hear those peculiar leaps in the melody. Gershwin's parents were not born in America. He was. But these immigrants, of course, as immigrants do, congregate around certain areas. And the Jewish immigrants who came to New York City very specifically developed an extraordinary culture that was partially from their homeland, but also partially conceived for them to deal with the problems of assimilation. And this is where Yiddish theater comes in. That was very, very prominent. There were many Yiddish theaters. There were music publishers of Jewish and Yiddish theater music. There were restaurants. I mean, it was a whole culture, particularly in the Lower East Side of New York, where Gershwin and his siblings lived for a period of time. So Gershwin was really saturated with this culture, and when he was young, he was considering actually writing for the Yiddish theater, but he decided, of course, to go mainstream. That said, it just shows that the Yiddish theater was very powerful, very lucrative, and enticing musically for what it did, both artistically and socially for this group. So one of the most interesting of the Gershwin piano rolls that I worked with this summer was a Yiddish theater song. And the title is Gott in Sein Mishpet, is Gerecht. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. This song was written in 1903 and was hugely popular for many, many years. But when I got the role, which had no way of telling me how to play it expressively, I thought I'd better try to go back and find some original source material from the period to get a sense of how this music sounded when it was new. And I found a 1905 recording of a Yiddish theater singer and actor named Solomon Shmulevitz, and I'd like you to hear it. Before I do that, I should tell you that this song was part of a show, a theatrical, called Broken Hearts. So I think you get the idea of what type of thing it was associated with, and I thought it would be really good to read the lyrics to the song so that you get an idea what the meaning of the song was to the people who heard it. So here we go. The Jew has in his life a consoling word in times of misfortune. It was given to him by his old grandfather. And whatever bad times the Jew meets up with, whatever takes place, he carries it with him quietly and with pleasure. Just as if nothing had happened, his face becomes pale, his eyes tear up, his heart pours out blood. To quiet his heartache and to make his heart strong, he consoles himself with this, quote, God is correct in his judgment. One must not say God is bad. God knows what he's doing. He doesn't punish anyone for no reason. Whoa. God is correct in his judgment. Well, we could all disagree with that if we wish, but that was what it was. And now here's the song from 1905.
Wort auf dein Brot und Gott hat ihn gegeben, ein alter
this Gershwin roll was from 1917, and it was therefore 15 years after the piece was written, and it's being played, so-called, by a 19-year-old kid for money. And so this will contextualize why there's a different approach. Nevertheless, there's something left from this recording. Trust me, I took many liberties. But I think that's part of the style. And the other thing is true is I think there's a joyousness, unfortunately, in this. I mean, there are dance rhythms, and this is a young guy, come on, you know, what do you want? The other is so dolorous and it's fatal, you know. So, okay, so that's that. Now, Gershwin's goal was never to be a player piano artist, per se. I mean, it had its good, bad sides. Mostly, it was a great way to make money. He quit high school at 15, and he went immediately to work in this huge popular piano industry that was just growing by leaps and bounds. And he would go over the weekend to Newark and make a few piano rolls and make more money than his father did. So there you go. And this was just a commercial venture for him. His goal from the very earliest period of his life, when he cut out little pictures of Beethoven and pasted them into his little scrapbooks, he wanted to be a composer. But what he did was he became attracted, of course, to this industry where he could really make profit, yes, but also where he could really integrate in a meaningful way. So his real goal, though, was, at least initially, to make it in the world of Broadway musical and Broadway reviews, providing his own songs and ultimately his own shows. That was the goal. And certainly with Swanee, that, as I said, opened the door, and he could be asked, he could go to somebody, say, I can provide you with this, I can provide you, and yeah, they take him. And right around 1920, his career really took off, and he provided a lot of tunes for different shows. And the ones that I'm covering this summer were never released on my previous CDs. And the singers have never heard the songs, but they are early Gershwin tunes from 1919, 1920 that were part of these reviews. And Allison is going to sing one of them called The Scandal Walk. Now, this was provided to a review that occurred yearly from the 20s all the way, I think, up through the 30s. It was called the George White Scandals, basically. And what it was comprised of was singing, dancing, skits, and women in scanty clothing, which was a big draw. It was considered a little risque, and fantastical costumes. So the Scandal Walk, which Allison will sing, is a tune that Gershwin wrote for this review, and I will play Gershwin's own piano roll, made the same year as he wrote the song, using his 10 fingers for the accompaniment.
Have you heard the latest scandal? It's the talk of the town. It's a dance of renown. It has just come around. There's no dance can hold a candle to this new one I found. Soon every band'll be inviting you to scandal. Everybody do the scandal walk. It's easy while you listen to that scandal talk. So breezy, pick someone out to whirl about. Don't be in doubt about it. You can do it, nothing to it. Pass the latest scandal to and fro. And when you find you've told each other all you know, why then you seek someone new to gossip to when you do the scandal walk. Have you heard the latest scandal? It's the talk of the town. Band'll be inviting you to scandal. Everybody do that scandal walk. It's easy while you listen to that scandal talk. So breezy, pick someone out to whirl about. Don't be in doubt about it. You can do it, nothing to it. Pass the latest scandal to and fro. And when you find you've told each other all you know, why then you seek someone new to gossip to when you do the scandal walk. Everybody do the scandal walk. It's easy while you listen to the scandal talk. So breezy, pick someone out to whirl about. Don't be in doubt about it. You can do it, nothing to it. Pass the latest scandal to and fro. And when you found you've told each other all you know, why then you pick someone new to gossip to. Then you do the scandal walk.
I was very, very lucky to find Allison and Cameron. Their presence in this, the last day that I'm here, and working out these pieces with vocalists has changed the direction of my big project extraordinarily, because it's one thing to play the role by itself, but with the singer, that's the way it was. And this disembodied Gershwin plays Gershwin. Wait a minute. It's a whole new world. Let's just put it that way. All right, going on. Weeping Willow and Lawdy Lawdy. Okay, well, as I've been alluding to all along, the backbone of Gershwin's work, and certainly everybody's on Tin Pan Alley and otherwise, was formed in the African American community. They were the ones who developed ragtime and the blues and jazz. And these, of course, have proved to be the great American music, and I don't see that it's going to be anything more than that in this country, but it's pretty good. So I thought it would be very important for me to present two examples, at least, of other materials than Gershwin, because these were materials that were there that all the people knew about. Everybody knew who Scott Joplin was. And I have fortunately gotten for my collection a 1916 original Joplin piano roll. Joplin, at the end of his life, when he died in 1917, made a series of piano rolls of his famous ragtimes. And these rolls are a bit disputed because Joplin was suffering basically from syphilis. And whether they really accurately portray his performance is questioned. Nevertheless, my roll is from 1916. It says played by Scott Joplin. And the roll is really very, very nice. And certainly Gershwin, if he didn't know this piece, he certainly knew Joplin's work. So I want to play Joplin's Weeping Willow Rag. And viol is a very different beast to pianolize. And I say pianolize, that's what I'm doing. It's foot pumping, but it had a term in the day, which was to pianolize, because this instrument was also referred to as a pianola. So I tend to use that term, and nobody knows what I'm talking about, but now you do. The next roll is recorded by a white woman, pianist, composer, entertainer, singer, dancer, named Edythe Baker in 1924. She was born, I think it's outside of Kansas City, some obscure, dusty Midwest town, and gravitated to Kansas City, I think St. Louis, certainly Chicago, at the time when the great African-American keyboardists were coming up from the South, up the Mississippi River. And this woman, we don't know why or how, studied their music and their way of playing and assimilated it into her own performance style. And she was young, very beautiful. She got on the vaudeville circuit and got to New York, which great success in New York, made 73 piano rolls, went to England, great. She was a member of Edward II's set. She married a member of the minor aristocracy. It's one of those 1920s stories that you wouldn't believe. That said, she faded into obscurity as soon as she got divorced. But the thing is that Baker's such an interesting story because of her cross-fertilization with the African-American community. She certainly worked with some of the great African-American piano roll artists of that period in the Midwest, and they also performed some of her music on piano roll. So it was not a fleeting flirtation, it was depth. And this roll is Edythe Baker's rendition of a blues, a real blues, written by Ida Cox, who was an African-American, very, very important blues singer. And it was Ida Cox's original composition, but this is Edythe Baker's arrangement of it. maybe the most beautiful role this evening. All right. So we're back to Gershwin. We can hear through Gershwin's 140 piano rolls his development in terms of the music that he was subjected to, worked through, certainly in ragtime and in the blues, some of which are not blues, but that's another story, but also in the Broadway ballad. He made many roll arrangements of music by his contemporaries, particularly Jerome Kern and Irving Berlin. He worked as Kern's rehearsal accompanist. He was a man about town. He was there. And he really absorbed whatever was going on around him. And again, we're coming back to good old Swanee. Once that hit, he was asked to provide a lot of stuff to other shows. And one of those was this lovely ballad that the name is I Was So Young, You Were So Beautiful, and it was created for a musical called Good Morning Judge, which had many composers submitting material, so it wasn't his own show.
I was a boy with a boyish heart, bowing down to love's command. You were a girl with a woman's art, and you held my fate in your hand. I was the moth, you were the flame, you led me on, I wasn't to blame. I was so young, you were so beautiful, what was a fellow to do? I was enraptured with you. They told me not to, but still I loved you, how I loved you. I was so young, you were so beautiful, I knew you couldn't be true. Each time I looked at you, my heart grew sad. 'Twas then I realized why men go mad. You made me give you all the love I had, for I was so young, yes, I was so young, and you were so beautiful.
You speak of love just as if you know what that wondrous passion means. Hearts that are young find a love that's new when they wake from foolish dreams. Poor little moth, chasing the flame, I know you told another the same. I was so young, you were so beautiful, what was a lady to do? I was enraptured with you. They told me not to, but still I loved you, how I loved you. I was so young, you were so beautiful, I knew you couldn't be true. Each time I looked at you, my heart grew sad. 'Twas then I realized why girls go mad. You made me give you all the love I had. too, but still I loved you. How I loved you. I was so young, you were so beautiful. I knew you couldn't be true. Each time I looked at you, my heart grew sad. 'Twas then I realized why girls go mad. You made me give you all the love I had, for you were so beautiful.
Okay, I'm looking at the tick-tick clock. I want to make this very quick. How a player piano works, you now know there's a bellows in there. The bellows sucks air through sorry. Whoops. I better take these off when I remember. Through these 88 holes that are in what's called the tracker bar. It's a brass bar. And on the far left, there's a great big square hole that triggers the sustain pedal. Now, I'm going to go back to my original piano rolls so you can see, as opposed to my recuts that don't show everything. These original rolls have, at the beginning of the roll, they have a circled number. You can take a look at it later if you can't see it now. A circled number, and this one is 70. That means that you set your tempo indicator here to 70, which means the roll passes across the tracker bar 7 feet per minute. And that establishes the speed of the roll. Then here on the Swanee roll, if you can see, there's blue writing, and that shows there's a little, like, a template down at the bottom that says P, 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 M, F, 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 F. And there's a line that starts coming away from the F, which means that this roll, which was Swanee, starts loud. And then the line wanders to the left, and that means you play softer in that place, and so forth, all the way through the roll. This is to guide the pianolist in terms of creating an expressive performance. Now, whether they were Gershwin's ideas, we don't know. That's a whole subject for silly scholarly debate, if I may say, because, for one thing, my impression of these lines is they're very helpful. They had unbelievable musicians working for this industry, and they knew how to shape a phrase. They knew how to stage sections. It was an art. They knew about it because they were well-trained musicians. So, but you don't have to do that. In fact, probably most people didn't do that because, you know, it takes practice to do this well, a lot of practice. Nevertheless, it's there, and you use all these levers. One will tell you to change your tempo. Another one will tell you, you can use it to soften the bottom so the top sounds louder and vice versa. You could also add your own sustain pedal so that you could beef up the rendition. And there's this middle lever on this one that you can adjust the tempo faster or slower for tempo modification. These were standard with most of these player pianos of that period. This was the type of piano that people had in their homes, and that's why they put all this stuff on there, in case people might want to do it. So that pretty much gets at what's going on in the player piano, I hope, so we can move on with the music. So, we're back to Gershwin. We're coming right back to the year 1919, and Gershwin was able to wangle his own musical. It was called La La Lucille, and the tune that Cameron's going to sing is one of the songs from Gershwin's first musical. And again, this is Gershwin's piano roll. It's his accompaniment to the song, as he would have likely done in a rehearsal.
Many queens I have seen on the stage and the screen who would never do. Billy Burke, Alice Joyce, none of them were my choice, but when I met you, my thumping heart from the very start knew right away, dear, that's why I say, dear, nobody but you. Nobody will do. I have seen them all, but didn't fall until I saw you, who's locked in my heart, who's my little yum yum. Honey, tell me who, you know it's nobody but you. Many queens I've seen on the stage and the screen who would never do. Billy Burke, Alice Joyce, none of them were my choice, but when I met you, my thumping heart from the very start knew right away, dear, that's why I say, dear, nobody but you. Nobody will do. I have seen them all, but didn't fall until I saw you, who's locked in my heart, who's my little yum yum. Honey, tell me who, you know it's nobody but you. Nobody but you. Nobody will do. I have seen them all, but didn't fall until I saw you, who's locked in my heart, who's my little yum yum. Honey, tell me who, you know it's nobody but you.
Okay, so it's just so great to have singers with these. The next selection is called My Faultless Pajama Girl, a very odd title, correct? And I didn't know what to make of it. I mean, I know what I thought about the piano roll itself, but finally, just this week, some of the people that are on these Facebook groups came up with the answer to it. My Faultless Pajama Girl was basically a jingle or an advertisement for the Faultless Pajama Company, and it was that's what it was. And on the cover of the sheet music, I always puzzled. I said, "What is this about?" I mean, was she some kind of are they talking about women being loose and this one's being very strict, or what? Well, basically, it's a woman in pajamas holding a candle. I mean, that's what it was. So anyway, but what's really interesting about this piece, I liked it, and liked it because of its musical quality. So I sought out the original sheet music, because what happened in these highly arranged rolls, which is what most of us associate with piano rolls, that there's lots of notes going all over the place. That's the style. You notice the ones we did so far are not like that. These are more like hand playing. But this is a highly arranged roll. So I wanted to see what the original sheet music was like and play it for you so you'd know where the music started. What happened was the companies would acquire these newly produced songs that were coming off the printing presses everywhere, and they would take the sheet music, learn it or whatever, and then enhance it by cutting in extra notes and other ideas on top of what was originally there. But I wanted you to hear what was originally there so you know what they actually did to these rolls. You have to pick up the pedals so you can use the actual piano pedal. As Al Jolson said, you ain't seen nothing yet. Now, I just want to do some credits here. Where do all these rolls come from? It's a long story, but currently no Gershwin collection is held in any institution, and where you could access them, study them. It's all in the hands of private collectors still, which of course we know is horrible in a certain way, but in my case it's not horrible because I'm working with a very generous collector who I've known for many years. His name is Richard Smith, and he owns a unique piano, antique, crazy store down in Glen Cove, Long Island, and he's allowed me access. He has probably the best collection currently of Gershwin's rolls. He doesn't have everything, but nobody does. I mean, some are still emerging. In fact, this one, I shouldn't say, is incredibly rare. And Rick just got it. So he let me use it for the recording session, and I just had to do it because it's such a great roll. And you can see that little foxtrot really was a good foxtrot. To begin with, we had great material. So here's what they did when they really went after the piano roll idiom. And this, all the magic is in here. Thank you, Rick. Okay, so I have one other role that I wanted to play. I thought there would be kids here, but not too many. But this is another heavily arranged role. done. Oh, by the way, you notice it's credited to two people, as was my Faultless Pajama Girl. And obviously, they couldn't get away with saying that only one person played this. So it's really another one of those politically incorrect lyrics. And you know, if you were an ethic, you were stereotyped. You know, that was just the way it was back then. And this Chinese people got under the radar of the stereotyping. But the role is really charming because it uses all these kind of Halloween-y, strange, scary sounds that we associate with silent film and movie too, even to this day. So back in 1917, these stereotypical musical devices were already in play. So here's the fun thing. So we're done, and there's food, and I guess Mar wants to say something, but again, this summer, I've done a lot of stuff, but this is right in there, you know. Right.